Well, and again, they are and they're not, in terms of, they've just got to, they're throwing their terminology out there. And, just giving you some things to think on.
Okay.
So are we ready to go to the next?
I am.
Okay,
Yep.
So decomposition, and then, okay, now we're going to look at how project schedule management fits in with the project management process groups. So schedule management has a whole lot of planning. We've got 5 different processes to help plan a schedule, and then we've got 1 process in control schedule. So if you know something is part of schedule management, a really good guess is planning, because everything except the one with control in the name, which is obviously in monitoring and controlling, everything else is in planning. And notice that all of the schedule processes have either schedule or activity in their name. So activity is pretty much synonymous with schedule. So if you see something that says sequence activity, you know that's a schedule management, and because it doesn't have the control word, you know it's part of planning.
So everything is part of planning as far as project schedule management processes.
Well, except for the control schedule, yeah.
Okay.
So, but in this way, so rather than having to, hardcore memorize these things, you can kind of discern them logically. But if you wanted to write them down for your brain dump, at least this makes it easier to write them down for your brain dump. So the first thing we're going to do, which is the first thing we do in virtually every knowledge area, is we're going to plan our schedule management. And again, this is probably a templated document so that you don't start with a blank page, because you do it every single time on every single project. So plan schedule management is the process of establishing the policies, procedures, and documentation for planning, developing, managing, executing, and controlling the project schedule. It belongs to the planning process group. So we have our inputs, which are the same inputs for all the other plans, and then we have our tools and techniques, which are virtually the same tools and techniques for all our other plans, expert judgment, meetings, and data analysis, and we come up with a schedule management plan, and we say, voila, plan schedule management results in the schedule management plan. So hopefully that's a readily accessible, output of the plan schedule management process. Okay, next we're going to define activities, and that's the process of identifying and documenting the specific actions to be performed to produce the project deliverables. Again, part of planning. So, again, we talked about activities being a further decomposition of the work package elements down to something that a single person can do in a reasonably tractable amount of time. So, maybe 2 weeks, maybe a month at the very most. So you've got the things going into defining the activities of the project management plan, the enterprise environmental factors, and the OPAs, organizational process assets. Remember, those are your internal processes or internal capabilities. And then to define the activity.
Okay, so the project schedule management is where we get the milestone list. Okay.
Uh-huh. And so these are all of the processes under the project schedule management knowledge area.
Okay, hold on, leave this slide up. This
and
is
that's
the
good
one
to take
I
good
was
notes, because we talked
curious.
about that eye hand brain thing.
What was that?
That it's good to write down notes, because it's good to think about that eye hand brain thing.
Not that I'll be able to utilize these right away, but when I have time, quiet time, I can go back and update. I always talk about the milestones, having those. So the project management plan, MG plan, enterprise, that's where we're naming our stakeholders as well. Actors. And this organizational process assets, is this where we're naming our resources as well?
Well, we're using all of our organizational process assets that could be applied to defining activities. So that could be how you break down the WBS. That could be, you know, what capabilities you have, what your project management information system is. So basically anything that the organization possesses in terms of activity definition could be used.
Okay. I'm ready.
Okay, so then we define our activities, and then we come up with an activity lists, activity attributes, and then the milestone list, and then the change requests and the project management plan updates. So again, the activity list will be added to the WBS dictionary, and the activity attributes will be part of the dictionary entries for those activities. And then potentially we will find change requests, and we will find project management plan updates too, because you know, the further we decompose, we might find that there are gaps in our coverage of the complete WBS. Okay, so next we're going to sequence activities, and obviously sequence gives things an order, and it's the process of identifying and documenting relationships among the project activities. Again, this is another planning process group activity. And so again, we've got the project management plan, we've got the other documents, we've got our external enterprise environmental factors, and we've got our internal organizational process assets. And so to sequence the activities, we're going to potentially use a precedence diagramming method, which we discussed previously, and then we're going to determine our dependencies and integration, and we're going to consider leads and lags, as well as our project management information system. So out of the sequence activity process comes the project schedule, network diagrams, and project document updates. Okay, next we're going to estimate activity durations, and that is the process of estimating the number of work periods needed to complete individual activities with estimated resources. So the key benefit of this process is that it provides the amount of time each activity will take to complete, which is a major input to the developed schedule process, so it belongs in planning also. So again, we have our same 4 inputs, and here, in order to estimate activity durations, because this is one of your project management professional superpowers, is the closer you can identify appropriate durations, the better off the project is. You know, obviously if you estimate too long, that might make the project a no-go, and if you estimate too short, you won't make the schedule. So
did we talk about 3-point estimating?
No, we have not gotten to that yet.
Okay. And we've talked about parametric.
And so we're going to use our expert judgment. We've talked about analogous estimating. We've talked about parametric estimating. 3 points is basically having the optimistic, the pessimistic, and the most likely estimate, and using those to come up with the actual estimate for the process or for the task, for the activity or for the work package. And bottom-up estimating, and that would be taking everything at the lowest level of the work breakdown structure, so you know, be it activities, work packages, or what have you, adding all those together and coming up with a schedule estimate would be bottoms up. And maybe you use different parts of different things. Maybe part of it's analogous, part of it's parametric, part of it's bottoms up in terms of coming up with an overall estimate. And then of course we're going to analyze our data. We're going to make some decisions, you know, for instance, how much we want to put into reserves, and we're going to have meetings. And so what comes out of that are the duration estimates, the basis of estimates for those estimates, and the project document updates. So again, the basis of estimates for the activity duration is yet another bit of information that should be put into the work breakdown structure dictionary, so that if any of the bases change, we can then potentially revisit those estimates. Okay, so here's another business scenario for you to look into.
Mission to activate a project initiative in her area of responsibility. Well, we come up with a range of estimates based on optimistic, pessimistic, and realistic durations. What approach are Jack and his team likely to take to determine their estimates? That is that 3-point estimating that we just talked about. They're going to, what approach? In the estimate activity, they're taking the 3-point estimating approach for this, and they're utilizing that to...
Yes.
Okay.
So the answer is they are indeed using PERT estimate, Program Evaluation Review Technique, which we are going to talk to shortly in this section.
I was just going to say, I don't think we talked about the PERT, but PERT, I guess, so the 3-point estimating approach, 3-point estimating is part of the PERT approach.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So PERT was the answer. So the next thing we're going to do in terms of the schedule knowledge area is we're going to develop the schedule. So this is the process of analyzing activity sequences, durations, resource requirements, and schedule constraints to create the project schedule model. Again, part of planning. So we have all of our inputs, including agreements. We have our tools and techniques, which include schedule network analysis, resource optimization, leads and lags, our project management information system, the critical path method, which is how we traverse the longest path through the network diagram. We do some data analysis, and then we might need to compress the schedule. So if we have a deadline, say if we're doing a toy release for the Christmas holidays, we may need to compress the schedule so that that toy is ready for actual release, you know, in a timely manner for Christmas. We don't want to just put it out, say, the day after Christmas or even just the week before, because we've got to build some momentum and have ads and pictures and things. Obviously, we want to optimize our resources, so if we only have so many electrical engineers, we may need to spread the tasks out over more time or hire more people. You know, that's a decision that you have to make. Of course, we've got our project management information system, we've got our data analysis, and we might use some agile release planning. So maybe in developing the schedule, if we're a little bit more agile, we don't have the whole entire schedule, but we just have parts of the schedule, and again, we progressively elaborate that. So from the developed schedule process, we come up with the schedule baseline, the project schedule, the schedule data, the project calendar, so when our resource is going to be employed on our project, any potential change requests, and then any potential updates to the project management plan, as well as the other project documents. Okay, so in terms of schedule network analysis, you need to know if the required resources are available. So this gives you a good idea for the project schedule. So if you've ever used Microsoft Project, you can go to the view which shows the resource utilization at any given time. So if something goes red, you can say that you have utilized more resources than you really have. And so you might want to shift some of those resources off to previous, which is unlikely, or future months, so that you can have more of a smooth staffing profile and you don't have to keep going up and down like Charlie Brown's shirt in terms of staffing, because obviously there was some cost to bringing people on and letting people go. So the critical path method determines the critical path on a project schedule. The critical chain method determines how you might add delays, such as letting tasks catch up with each other, like I was talking about, say, a review milestone. But you don't want to add just filler on every task. You want to have that centralized in one overarching task, because if you give everybody an extra day, it's like if you tell your kids to clean your room, if you tell them they have 2 hours, they will take all of that 2 hours. But if you tell them they have 1 hour, I mean, maybe they can do it. So, in an hour. But if you tell them for the exact same job they have 2 hours, they'll probably take 2 hours. And then other things you might do for scheduled network analysis is you might want to have a what-if scenario to see, by changing something, what would the impact on the schedule be.
Couldn't you set up the flow chart?
Yes, certainly. That would certainly be a way to determine how this all works. And probably it's something like diagramming would be best done in Microsoft Project, unless you're just, say, flowcharting a little part of the project, because again, when we're talking about PMI, we're talking about this long-lived, multi-million-dollar, distributed, multicultural project that goes on and on and on. You'd never be able to fit that onto paper, even if you could paper the walls of a very large room. And then, of course, you want to use resource optimization techniques so that you have optimal utilization of resources on the project. And as I said, you don't necessarily want to go up and down with your staffing unless that's really necessary, because that is a little bit unsettling. And when we talk about our group performance and how groups work together, that is an issue. So now let's talk about PERT, which was indeed the right answer a couple of slides back. And so this talks about the 3-point estimates for an activity. So we've got P for pessimistic, we've got M for most likely, and O for optimistic. And again, the more ways you can associate schedule or time to an activity, the better you can understand it. If you say, well, this could go bad and take longer than expected because of XYZ thing, or we could do it really quickly because of A, B, or C thing, the more you understand that, that activity or work package at hand. So there are basically different kinds of calculations you can do, and certainly you can do the 6-point estimate, where you take the pessimistic estimate 4 times the most likely estimate and the optimistic estimate. You add those all together and you divide by 6. And of course, the reason you're dividing by 6 is because you've got 6 things in the numerator.
Could you leave the slide up?
Oh, sure. And again, these are probably things that you want to have on your brain dump. To calculate it, and the reason I think that PERT estimate, which is not just a regular 3-point where you take pessimistic, optimistic, and most likely and divide by 3, is because the standard deviation is the pessimistic minus the optimistic divided by 6. So I think that's why they want to have 6 components in that, in that PERT calculation. And then
I haven't studied this in like 25 years, I think it is.
I would say, yeah, because this is dredging up all your old statistical knowledge. So as I said, the PMBOK expects more than the PMBOK. So you've got to drag out algebra and statistics and dust off a lot of that old stuff, economics.
I look at I was looking at my old college stuff because I need statistics for my study. And I was like, I looked at a message from the teacher and it says, thank you, Mrs. Becker, for keeping me on my toes. This was great work. And I looked at it and I went, how did I solve this?
Hey, that's good.
No, it's not good. I don't remember. I don't know if it's because I'm in my 50s, but I look at my old stuff it was in boxes because I need it. And I was looking at it and I went, how did I do this? You know, I'm like, I don't remember. That's scary.
That means your mind is smarter than you think.
I'm smarter. It's failing me. I think it's dementia setting in.
No, that's okay, because if you say it's dementia or Alzheimer's, it's not. It's when you vehemently deny it, then it is.
Yes. Oh, well, that's true. Yeah.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah. All right. That works.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so the standard deviation is obviously pessimistic minus optimistic divided by 6, and then so think of the 6's in here, and then to calculate the variance of an activity is the standard deviation squared. So I don't think you'll ever have to calculate the variance, but just so you know it, again, this is good brain dump material. Okay, so here's a PERT example. So this has a little bit of PERT and has some Lean Six Sigma and all kinds of good things in there. So you can see how the Lean Six Sigma, and I'm pointing, I should stop pointing with my fingers and point with my hand. So, basically we go from -3 sigma to 3 sigma. So there's our 6 sigma kinds of things, so that, that remnant in the tails out beyond the 6 sigma is kind of what you'd be left with if you remove errors to the 6 sigma level. So given an optimistic estimate of 20, a pessimistic estimate of 70, and a most likely estimate of 30, we have 70 plus 30 times 4 plus 20 divided by 6, that's 35. And then we have 70 minus 20 divided by 6. So, so here we have the expected duration calculation, and here we have the standard deviation. And again, there's, a little bit of rounding there. So the likelihood, so one standard deviation is 68.2. 2 standard deviations is 95.4, and 3 standard deviations is 99.7. So you want to know these, 1 sigma, 2 sigma, and 3 sigma standard deviation numbers, because you may be asked those on the test. Again, and I don't know that this is in the book at all, but this is kind of a Lean Six Sigma thing that you need to know for project management. So 1 sigma is about 68.2, so 1 sigma in either direction is, that area under the curve. 2 sigma is 95.4, which is from here to there, and then 3 sigma covers 99.7. So 6 sigma is a level of confidence where 3.4 times out of a million, only 3.4 times out of a million, you'd fall outside the stated range. So that's the way far tails.